Yes, dear students, today we are going to study about World Trade Organization and its GATT, etc. Okay. So, World Trade Organization WTO, this is popularly known as World Trade Organization or WTO. The WTO was founded in 1995. When did this found? Founded in 1995 as the successor organization of the General Agreement on Trade and Tariff. GATT was GATT. What is the full form of GATT? General Agreement on Trade and Tariff. That is known as GATT. So, GATT was established in 1948 with 23 countries as the global trade organization to administer all multilateral trade agreements by providing equal opportunities to all countries in the international market for trading purposes, of course. So, this GATT, World Trade Organization, wanted to bring multilateral trade agreements among all countries actually. This is the purpose of GATT, multilateral trade agreements, by providing what is actually multi-trade agreements provide an opportunity to all countries in the international market for trading purposes, so that all countries can trade freely in the international market. That is what. Okay. WTO, World Trade Organization, is expected to establish a rule-based trading regime in which nations cannot place arbitrary restrictions on trade. Nowadays, what is happening? No country can stop Indian products in their market. So, almost all countries agreed, they signed this GATT agreement. There is a GATT agreement. That agreement is making sure that all countries can do business each other and they can exchange their products, and one country's product can be distributed in other country's territory. That is also freely. That is what actually multilateral trade agreement GATT by GATT is offering. Okay. So, all what is happening, all this agreement is what is happening. In addition, its purpose is also to enlarge production and trade of services. This agreement is also making sure that production and trade of services, to ensure what actually that is ensuring, to ensure optimum utilization of world resources and to protect the environment. The World Trade Organization agreements cover trade in goods as well as the services to facilitate international trade. So, the World Trade Organization wants to promote production, marketing, and also they wanted to facilitate international trade among all other countries. Okay, there are many countries in the world, so all countries must work on a common platform. That is what actually GATT is making sure. Okay, multilateral trade agreement is there. Multilateral trade agreement. So, what is by that? What purpose is happening? World Trade Organization is expected to establish a rule-based trading regime in which nations cannot place arbitrary restrictions on trade. There is no restrictions on trade. A country cannot restrict another country's product in their country. Okay, so free trade is happening. In addition, its purpose is also to enlarge production. What is happening? To enlarge production and trade of services. So, trade and services must take place in the world without any restrictions. This point you need to remember. There is without any restrictions, trade and production and also the marketing and the maximum utilization of resources in the world must take place. That is what the purpose and the goal of World Trade Organization's GATT agreement. So, almost all countries agreed this. General Agreement on Trade and Tariff, that is also known as GATT. Okay, dear students, I understood you understood this point which I explained here. Okay, it started the founded this World Trade Organization, WTO. The WTO was founded in 1995. This year you need to remember. We can move on the next point. Some scholars question the usefulness of India being a member of the WTO World Organization as a major volume of international trade occurs among the developed nations. Some economists or scholars of our country question Indian government. Why did India join or signed the agreement, GATT agreement? Because most of the international trades occurs among the developed nations. India is not a developed nation. We are on the way to development. Okay, we are developing. Okay, so they also say that while developed countries file complaints over agricultural subsidies given in their countries, developing countries feel cheated. So the developed, of course, the maximum benefit of this GATT agreement, which countries are getting? Developed nations are getting. Sometimes developing countries feel cheated as they are forced to open their markets for developed countries but are not allowed access to the markets of developed countries. What is happening? India is a developing nation, and India like countries, developing countries need to open their market for developed countries. Okay, American companies' products are easily available in our market. We cannot stop it. There cannot put any restriction. Okay, we cannot apply any restriction on developed nations companies. But what is happening? India like developing countries' products cannot be entered freely in developed countries. Okay, so developed countries are not allowing developing nations products serve well in their country. Okay, there is a stepmother policy in this agreement. So many scholars are questioning Indian government. What is the use of joining or with the GATT agreement? What is the use of signing GATT agreement, which is promoted by World Trade Organization? You understood this point? So we can move on to the next point. Indian economy during reforms. An assessment we can do. The reform process has completed 3 decades since its introduction. When did the reform actually started in India? In India, reforms started mainly in 1991 onwards, because in 1991 Indian government introduced new economic policy. After that, we can see lot of changes in our economy, lot of development is occurring in our economy. So that happened. Let us now look at the performance of the Indian economy during this period. In economics, the growth of an economy is measured by the gross domestic GDP, gross domestic product. So we need to know what is the GDP of a country, then we will come to know the country's economical development. We will come to know that company's industrial development. We will also come to know that country's agricultural development. So we need to study the gross domestic product within a country within a particular time period. The post 1991 India witnessed a rapid growth in GDP on a continual basis for 2 decades. What happened in 1991 onwards? We can see lot of development took place in our country, rapid changes, rapid growth. We experienced at least around 20 years. We have seen lot of changes in our economy. The growth of GDP increased from 5.6% during 1980 to 91 to Then it was actually what happened, it was earlier it was 5.6%, but after that we could see in 91 this 8.2 percentage changes, also a percent during 2007 to 12 we can see 8.2 percentage changes. A lot of changes are there. Okay, so around double changes, 5.6 to 8.2 we received. We cannot say double, but of course considerable changes we got in the GDP. Okay, so it is around 3 percentage changes we got. Then during the reform period, the growth of agriculture has declined. What happened? Industrial development got changes more, but agriculture growth has declined, while the industrial sector reported fluctuation, but there is some changes, but sometimes it is going back. The fluctuation is there, up and down is happened. Okay, up and down happened. The growth of the service sector has gone up, but whereas what happened, the service sector means mainly people do work, mainly office work. Service sector has gone up. This indicates that the GDP growth is mainly driven by growth in the service sector. So in that time, of course, we wanted to focus on both sector, on goods and services, not only the services, but we also wanted to accelerate the growth of production, goods production. Okay, so this is what actually the reforms. What is the reforms? How do we identify the country's reform? We identify it by measuring the GDP level. When a country's GDP level is good, that means the country's overall economic growth is good. That is what. Okay, so we can move on to the next point now. During 2012 to 15, there has been a setback in the growth rates of different sectors witnessed post 1991. What happened? In the year of 2012 to 15, we faced a setback in the growth. Okay, but during 91 onwards it was in a good position, but when it came in the year of 2012 to 15, what happened? There we experienced a setback. While agriculture recorded a high growth rate during 13-14, but what happened in 2013 to 14, the agriculture sector's growth was really good. This sector witnessed a negative growth in the subsequent year. But what happened in 2015, in the later year, what happened? This sector, agriculture sector, also witnessed a negative growth in the subsequent year. That also growth went down, while the service sector continued to witness a high level of growth. So we can see lot of changes happened in the field of service sector, not in the field of agriculture. Much changes we could not experience in the field of agriculture as well as in the sector of industries. So then also the GDP level went up higher than the overall GDP growth in 2014 to 15. This sector witnessed the high growth rate of 9.8%. In the year of 2014 to 15, we have seen huge difference and a high rate of growth we experienced. That was 9.8% growth we experienced. The industrial sector witnessed a steep decline during 2012 to 13. In the subsequent years, it began to show continuous positive growth. Of course, in the industrial sector, we witnessed a steep decline. Industrial sector could not do well in the year of 2012 to 13. But after that, in the subsequent years, after that, what happened? The industrial sector began to show a continuous positive growth. Okay. So here we understood that actually service sector was doing good, but the industrial sector was experiencing fluctuation. But what happened, the agriculture field was also not doing always good, but sometimes it did well, okay. Especially in 2013 to 14, the agriculture sector witnessed negative growth, okay. So I trust you understood this point. The opening of the economy has led to a rapid increase in foreign direct investment and foreign exchange reserves. When our economy opened for what? Globalization, liberalization and privatization. The economy opened in 1991 because of the new economic policy. The new economic policy the India government implemented in India, so that what happened, Indian economy attracted more foreign direct investment, a rapid increase, rapid changes, growth we experienced. The foreign investment, which includes foreign direct investment, FDI, the short form is FDI, foreign direct investment, foreign institutional investment, okay, foreign institutional investment. There are many foreign institutions came to India and invested in the banking sector mainly, okay. So lot of foreign companies came to India, has increased from about US $100 billion changes, okay. Then that again increased. So what happened in 1991? It was increased from about US 100 million to 30 billion. There is a huge difference between million and billion, okay. Million is less than billion. Billion is a huge amount, okay. 1 million is 10 lakh. So this is actually crores. This will go in crores. So initially we were actually before 1990 to 1991, India was actually receiving only millions. The calculation was in millions. After that it changed to billion in 2017 to 18. There has been an increase in the foreign exchange reserves from about US 6 billion in 1991 to about US. What happened? We were receiving less amount, less foreign investment. After that we were receiving around 413 billion in 2018 to 16. India is one of the largest foreign exchange reserve holders in the world. Now you see lot of changes you can see. India is holding more foreign exchange in its country, okay. Since 1991, India is seen as a successful exporter of auto parts. Nowadays, after introducing this new economic policy, India is exporting auto parts, pharmaceutical goods, engineering goods, IT software and textiles. Rising prices have also been kept under control from that period onwards. 2000, mainly you can see in 2000 times, okay. Though we introduced the new economic policy in 1991, we can see considerable changes in the field of growth in 2000 onwards. More changes you can see, lot of changes. Of course, there is a changes 1991 onwards, but the visible changes India felt after 2000, we can say. That is my personal opinion. So rising prices have also been kept under control. Nowadays, what is the government got control? Government departments are working properly. So the better way we are managing our banking areas, the investment areas we are managing. More foreign banks entered into Indian economy. More multinational companies are operating within this economy or within this land. And more professionally our private organizations are doing because of this liberalization, privatization and globalization. That is what actually you need to remember. Okay. Okay, dear students, these are the main points you need to remember in this. So what did we come to know? 1991 onwards the new economic policy started. From that day onwards a lot of changes are taking place in our country. So, in the field of agriculture, industrial sector, also in the sector of road transportation, science and technology, and in the investment field in the banking sector a lot of changes. Now, we are also receiving a lot of foreign exchange from foreign countries because we are also exporting so many goods. Another thing is that many Indians live in other country and also they also send foreign money to India. So, India's economic growth is getting accelerated in a very level. There are a lot of changes you can see. That is what actually the main points we have studied in this lesson. So, a lot of changes in everywhere we have seen the changes, higher growth, the GDP level increased. GDP is the measurement of an economy. Okay, we measure the economy with this GDP. So, if the goods production and its value is goods and services production and its value is higher, then the economy is doing good. That is what the parameter that is the way we understand the economy is doing good or not. Okay. So, a lot of continuous positive growth our economy is showing after implementing this new economic policy. Okay, dear students, I trust you understood all these points well. Yes, dear students, we were discussing or we were going through the details of privatization, liberalization and globalization and its impact on Indian economy. So, today we are going to study the same topic again and its further development, what type of changes all those brought in our country we wanted to know. On the other hand, the reform process has been widely criticized for not being able to address some of the basic problems facing our economy, especially in areas of employment, agriculture, industry, infrastructure development and fiscal management. This point you needed to remember that the Indian government implemented or started following India's new economic policy. That new economic policy introduced in 1991, that is what actually we were studying. So, even though the new economic policy introduced there, in many areas we could not perform well. What are the main areas? Mainly employment we could not. Still the unemployments are here. Unemployment people are in large number in our country. Okay, employment opportunities we could not enhance more. Agriculture, industry, infrastructure development and fiscal management is still not showing that much development when we compare to other highly developed countries. Okay, there are some benefits in our country, there are some changes we can see. Okay, but it didn't bring maximum benefits to our country. That is what actually many economists are saying. Growth and employment we can see. Though the GDP growth rate has increased in the reform period, due to this reform, what happened? So, there are some changes in our GDP growth has increased in the reform period. Scholars point out that the reform-led growth has not generated sufficient employment opportunities in the country. You will study the link between different aspects of employment and growth in the next unit, so that we are going to study about this. So, our scholars are saying that India could not perform well even though it changed its economic policy. There are still the issues are prevailing. The issues are main issues are employment, agriculture, industrial development, infrastructure development and fiscal management. Okay. So, all those issues are still there. We could not experience maximum development in all those areas. We want to bring more changes. Okay. Growth and employment, that is important point actually. The people, citizens of our country must get enough job opportunity. The growth in the field of infrastructure development and in the field of industrialization we wanted to bring much changes, but our government could not attain it even though they changed the economic policy in 1991. So we can check all those details. Of course, our scholars agree that the GDP level increased, but the main benefits, the maximum benefit we could not attain in the field of employment, agriculture, industrial and infrastructure development mainly. All those areas we can check all those details again. So reforms in agriculture, see, reforms have not been able to benefit agriculture where the growth rate has been decelerating. There was no acceleration, there is no much changes, but it was going its opposite, decelerating. Okay, reforms have not been able to benefit agriculture. In the field of agriculture, we could not attain much benefit. Okay, though we implemented a lot of changes in the field of agriculture, the production in we have surplus production, but actually the government wants to get much changes, more export we wanted to do to other countries. We wanted to export more agricultural products to other countries. When we compare our agricultural production with some other developed nations, then we can find that our agricultural production is not up to the mark, up to the level. Okay, so since 1991, public investment in agricultural sector, especially in infrastructure, which includes irrigation, power, roads, market linkages and research and extension has fallen. After what was actually they are telling that the infrastructure development, which includes irrigation, power, roads, market linkages and research and extension, which played a crucial role in the green revolution, has fallen. That is saying that after 1991 our country could not perform well in some areas like irrigation, power, roads, market linkages and research and extension, these areas. Of course, there are some changes, but actually not up to the mark, not up to the level. Okay, so once it performed very well, after that actually we neglected the agricultural area. So our government were focusing a little bit on in every areas, of course. So what happened, the agricultural area they neglected. Okay, so that was further the partial removal of fertilizer subsidy has led to increase in the cost of production. What happened, the government removed the fertilizer subsidy to the farmers. Then what happened, that led to the increase in the cost of production. So the farmers were in troubles again, which has severely affected the small and marginal farmers. They could not manage their farming properly. That is what actually you need to understand. This sector has been experiencing a number of policy changes, such as reduction in import duties on agricultural products, now low minimum support price, and lifting of quantitative restrictions on the imports of agricultural products. What happened? The government actually changed its policies, so that actually export import policies they had made, the government had made some changes, so that more imported goods were still coming to our economy, into our India. So the more important agricultural products were coming to our economy, that also fed our domestic, that also destroyed our domestic agriculture or farmers productivity, that also affected the farmers deeply. These have adversely affected Indian farmers, as they now have to face increased international competition. So more products from other countries came to India. So that what happened, our farmers faced a problem. This have adversely, wrongly affected Indian farmers, as they now have to face increased international competition. Our farmers were not capable to face international competition. More finished, more highly professionally managed goods were coming to Indian markets, that our farmers could not face. That is what actually you need to understand, because of our poor import policy. Okay. So here what we studied, actually the government neglected in after 1991. What happened? The agriculture area we didn't focus much. That made the farmers that affected farmers adversely. Adversely means wrongly and negatively. So that affected our farmers. So the food the farmers were not doing good at that time. Moreover, because of export-oriented policy strategies in agriculture, there has been a shift from production for the domestic market towards production for the export market, focusing on cash crops in lieu of production of food grains. What happened? Indian government was focusing more on export products, mainly cash crops. So, okay, this puts pressure on prices of food grains. This put pressure on prices of food grains. So the government was actually promoting more even in the Britishers' time. The same thing happened actually. The British government also promoted more production of more food cash crops, okay, rather than food grains. The same thing, almost the same thing happened in after 1991. The same thing happened. So the farmers came in a pressure on prices of food grains. That happened. Okay. We can again move on to the next point and understand reforms in industry. What happened? Okay, we have already studied that actually in the field of agriculture our farmers could not do well because of the policy of government. Government was importing more agricultural products from other countries. Also the government was promoting more cash crops in our country rather than food crops. Then now we can see what are the reforms occurred or took place in the industrial sector. Industrial growth has also recorded a slowdown. So there they are saying industrial growth also find its slow down. This is because of decreasing demand of industrial products due to various reasons such as cheaper imports. What happened? India was due to its import policy, import export, you know that. So due to its import policy, what happened? More cheap products came to India. That also affected destroyed our industries more. Inadequate investment in infrastructure, etc. This is also inadequate import policy, as well as the inadequate investment in infrastructure development. India didn't do adequate infrastructural development in India. That also destroyed Indian industrial sector. Okay. So in a globalized world, developing countries are compelled to open up their economies to greater flow of goods and capital from developed countries and rendering their industries vulnerable to imported goods. This point you need to remember. What are only because of this globalization, what we are already studying. We are studying about privatization, liberalization and globalization. Okay. So what happened? Only because of this globalization we have introduced in our economy. Our Indian market opened for foreign market. That is what the point you needed to remember. Only because of that, what happened? The developing countries are compelled. India, like developing countries, needed to import or open their economy for foreign goods from developed countries. So more foreign goods came to our market from developed countries. But what is happening? America, like developed countries, are not allowing goods from developing countries. We are a developing country. We are not a developed country. Yes, we are on the way. Okay. So what happened? Developing countries are compelled to open up their economies to greater flow of goods and capital from developed countries. So from developed countries, a lot of goods flow and capital came to developing countries. okay, and rendering all those industries from developed countries are rendering their industry service in India like countries. Cheaper imports have thus replaced the demand for domestic goods. What happened? India's domestic goods, the production, domestic production went down, and it's slowed down. Okay, domestic manufacturers are facing competition from imports. So many finished goods from foreign countries came to Indian market, so that our farmers also faced problems, and the manufacturers were also faced problems. Okay, manufacturers too were faced problems. The infrastructure facilities, including power supply, have remained inadequate due to lack of investment. What happened? So a lack of investment, that was very low. The infrastructure facilities was very low, not in a sufficient way. It was not adequate. It was not in a proper way. Infrastructure facilities were not there. Then including power supply was not, the proper power supply were not there. Even in India's many areas didn't receive power supply. Okay, but now proudly we can say India's every villages received power supply. Okay, it happened after 2014 only. Okay, so the Narendra Modi government implemented power supply in an entire nation. That is what actually. Okay, so the every villages in our India received now power supply. That's one. The have remained inadequate due to lack of investment. There were no investment in our country. Then globalization is thus often seen as creating conditions for the free movement of goods and services from foreign countries that adversely affect the local industries and employment opportunities in developing countries. What is happened? More goods came to India from developed countries. Also, it affected our domestic industries, domestic production. It affected. Then what happened? The farmers also faced troubles that we have already studied in our earlier part. We have studied. Then the other thing is that our local industries and employment opportunities, local industries faced problem. Then employment opportunities also got adverse effect. Okay, so they could not perform well. Moreover, a developing country like India still does not have the access to the developed countries markets. So what is happening? The developed countries didn't open their market for India like developing nations. So the access is not there. India still does not have the access to developed countries markets because of high non-tariff barriers, because the non-tariff barriers are there. Okay, so that actually Indian products cannot easily find its place in USA market. For example, although all quota restrictions on exports of textiles and clothing have been removed in India, USA has not removed their quota restrictions on import of textiles from India and China. Still, see, the Indian textiles products could not find its market in USA because they kept the restrictions still there. Okay, they did remove the restrictions still there. Okay, the restrictions are still there. They didn't remove the restrictions. That's all. So what we studied in this area, we studied about that actually the proper economic policy we didn't implemented in our country. So still the developed nations are not opened their market for India like developing nations. Then more products and services from developed nations came to India like developing nations. So then that created unemployment opportunities in India that also adversely affected Indian markets and its industries. That's all. Now we can move on to the next point. Disinvestment. What is disinvestment? Disinvestment. Every year the government fixes a target for disinvestment of PSEs, public sector enterprises. For instance, in 91 to 92, what happened? It was a target to mobilize Rs 2,500 crore India decided to collect by by selling PSCs to private parties. So collect through disinvestment, the India government was able to mobilize 3,040 crore more than the target. What happened? India collected more money in that. In 2017 to 18, the target was about 1 lakh crore and the achievement was about 1 lakh crore plus 57 crore. That means 1,57 crore Indian government collected. So what are the collection of money was good. India saved this much money. India could attain this much money, more than 1 lakh crore rupees by disinvestment. India didn't invest more in public sector enterprises, whereas they privatized this so that Indian government could collect this much amount. But the point is that you need to remember, the critics point out, there are criticism some people will do, the critics, the scholars, some scholars are saying that critics point out that the assets of public sector enterprises have been undervalued and sold to the private sector. They are saying that our government could make more money, get more money, but for this amount they sold out everything, and Indian government didn't do well on selling all these public enterprises. It only gave undervalued and sold to the private sector. This means that there has been a substantial loss to the government and the outright sale of public assets. Moreover, so what happened outright, all of a sudden India government took decision and sold all those things actually without doing the proper valuation of the property. Okay, so India could make more money, they are saying. Okay, so that is what the proceeds from the disinvestments are used to offset the shortage of government revenues rather than using it for the development of public sector enterprises and building social infrastructure in the country. What happened? This amount, Indian government sold many of our public sector enterprises, but that money they didn't use for the development, infrastructure development, but what they did, they were spending for that money for the shortage of government revenues they were managing by taking that money, by using that money. But they could have done much investment in the field of social infrastructure development in the country. Okay, but they didn't do that actually. That is what the do you think selling a part of the properties of government companies is the best way to improve their efficiency? Do you think that the government, our Indian government Indian government is running many public sector enterprises like Railway is there, then NTPC is there, there are many, Bharat Heavy Electrical Limited is there. So do you think by selling this India can manage a better economy? Do you really think? So you can think about it and discuss about this. By selling they could not make any difference. Indian government needed to do public welfare by maintaining proper industries which is run by government of India itself. Okay, so now we can move on to the next point, reforms and fiscal policies. Fiscal policies means what? Fiscal policy means that policies which is connected with the tax revenues. Okay, so economic reforms have placed limits on the growth of public expenditure, especially in social sectors. The tax reductions in the reform period aimed at yielding larger revenue and curb tax evasion. So there are many people, what they do, they escape, they do not pay the tax properly in time. So the Indian government wants to promote proper tax system in India. They wanted to, what they wanted to do, they wanted to increase the growth in every level in our economy. Every levels of changes, or the changes in every level our economy can bring only when it has proper tax system. Okay, proper tax system. The citizens should not escape from the tax paying. Okay, they have not resulted in increase in tax revenue. India government changed its tax policy. Then also what happened? Then also we could not see much increase in tax revenue. The reform policies involved in tax reduction have curtailed the scope for raising revenue through custom duties. What happened? Though the government changed the tax reform tax policies, then also they curtailed, they could not bring much changes, the scope of raising revenue. Okay, in order to attract foreign investment, tax incentives are provided to foreign investors. In order to attract, of course, every economy wanted to attract more investment from some other countries, more international companies to come to India and invest. That is what our aim to. That is why globalization we introduced, we opened our Indian market for foreign companies, foreign market. So what we want to, then we wanted to give some tax incentives, then only we can attract more companies, more producers, more industries, more entrepreneurs or more manufacturers in our economy. Then what will happen? Foreign investors, which further reduce the scope for raising tax revenues. This has a negative impact on developmental and welfare expenditures. So we have given much consideration or concession to foreign investors. We reduced their tax, so that we could not actually make much changes in our foreign exchange. We could not raise our foreign exchange. That also adversely affected our economical growth. Growth of our economy could not perform well. All these actually, the tax reforms, fiscal policies which may be made in those days didn't help our economy to get further changes or development. So conclusion, what is the conclusion? What we understood from this lesson until now? The conclusion, the process of globalization through liberalization and privatization policies has produced positive as well as negative results both for India and other countries. You need to remember, there are many developing nations who followed privatization, globalization and liberalization in those days. In those days means in 1990s. Okay, so lot of changes came. There are also a lot of negative as well as a lot of positive changes, impact we can see in our market. Okay, you need to understand it, you need to study it properly, and you should do self study and write the details, or you can understand it more better way. The process of globalization through liberalization and privatization policies has produced positive as well as negative results both for India and other countries. Some scholars argue that globalization should be seen as an opportunity in terms of greater access to global markets. What happened? Some scholars say yes, of course it benefited to India like countries, and even India also got much benefits from this globalization, liberalization and privatization. So that is why we also entered in the global markets. More global investors, more international companies are providing their service in India, so that actually a lot of job opportunities, employment opportunities they are creating. They are creating a competition in the market. We are our domestic producers, our industries are also learning more from international companies, their marketing, their production policies, their production strategies, their marketing strategies and their expansional strategies. Our people means our producers and our industrialists or manufacturers, they are also learning, so that the more productivity increasing within this country. Lot of investment came to our market. So many financial institutions are operating within this nation now, only because of this globalization and liberalization. So, okay, high technology and increase the possibility of large industries of developing countries to become important players in the international area. This is what the main point. High technology, we can see now in India, more foreign companies came to India like countries, so that more technological changes we can see in our market, so that our domestic industries are also learning, they are also using cutting edge technology nowadays. Okay, so high technology and increased possibilities of large industries of developing countries to become important players in the international market. Nowadays what is happening? So the high technology, we are also using the cutting edge technologies, okay, state of the art technologies, everything we are using nowadays. So developing countries are also getting lot of changes. Now our companies are also doing better, so better now we also got an opportunity to enter into the global market. Okay, so more job opportunities, more expansion, more job opportunities and more productivity, all these industries are creating in our country.